Hey photographers, welcome to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm here to help you build a sustainable photography business. That means improving your photo skills, building on your business knowledge, and honing your marketing abilities. But it also means helping you work more efficiently so you don't get burnt out in the long run. We do try to bring the show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, Miilu.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing. Again, photographersedit.com and Miilu.com. All right, let's get into today's episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back for another Bokeh Podcast episode, a brand new guest, and actually a topic that we haven't really spent a whole lot of time on, engagement sessions. We're going to get there in a second with Courtney Bowlden. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the show and hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've wanted to come on for a while now, so I'm excited.
Well, yeah, we kind of went back and forth a little bit and landed on what I think is going to be a really great topic. We're just going to shed some light on your approach to engagement sessions, which I think will be really great, not just for new photographers, but also maybe for other established photographers who are like, you know what is that other photographer doing? And maybe get some ideas as a result of the conversation. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. I normally start our podcast interviews, conversations with a few questions. The first has to do with brand position, or as we would define it very simply, the unique value proposition that your business offers to your marketplace. So I'm curious, what is your business's brand position?
Mine would have to be, I love making people feel comfortable in front of the camera. And I love having fun. I love debunking the whole, I'm not photogenic, but I also just love telling a story of the people that I'm capturing.
Okay. So there are a couple of different things in there. What's your favorite? Like, what's your favorite part of those two or three things that you mentioned?
Oh, I don't have a favorite. I love it all. It's just all wrapped up in one.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think probably just making people feel comfortable in front of the camera.
And that makes a big difference. I was just having a conversation with another photographer about that very concept. And it seems kind of like a given or cliche, but there have been way too many times where I've seen photographers at workshops just kind of mouth shut, just shooting a model, not engaging with them, not having conversation with them, not giving them feedback, encouragement, compliments. And I just wonder how much of that translates to the reality of their normal shoots. It's really important that we're not only proactive in creating a really comfortable environment to begin with, but then also ongoing communication to help the subject feel comfortable in front of the camera during the shoot too. And we're going to talk about a little bit maybe about how you do that during your engagement sessions here in just a little bit. But I want to ask you another question about customer experience, actually, very much along the same lines. From your experience as a business owner, and you told me earlier you've been in business for 11 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So 2009.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, major props to you for being able to make a business go like that.
Thank you.
What's been one of the most important lessons that you've learned about providing a great customer experience?
I think just the connection and letting my couples or clients know I'm there for them before and during and after the session. So just because I'm there for the wedding doesn't mean that I'm not going to be there during the whole wedding process.
Ah, okay. Yeah, you mentioned connection. And actually, this has become a really popular thing amongst the photography industry, which is great. But it's also kind of the thing to say. And, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to do. I'm curious, how do you actually make this tangible and practical? What does it look like that you're connected with them throughout the process?
Well, I love touching base with them. So like I will email them and see how things are going. If they need help with finding any vendors, if they have any questions on their, color scheme, like I get, brides who are like, I don't know how this is going to photograph. And so I like to help them and work with them.
Okay.
But also just, I send them guides. If I know that they're bringing their, dog to the wedding or whatever, I will send them like little tips like, hey, here's something that I read. So I let them know that like I'm thinking of them during this whole process and that I I care about them like as an individual client, not just like, you're paying me to photograph your wedding or you're paying me to photograph whatever.
Yep.
So I want them to know that I'm there for them throughout the whole thing. And then afterwards I touch base with them, usually send them like a little thank you card or a gift, something that's like personal to them. It would be a lot easier if I could just like print it out on a card, but I handwrite everything. And
That's awesome.
I do that because I want them to know that like they are, an individual. They mean a lot to me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I do it. And then I also will, I love following them on Instagram or Facebook and seeing what they're up to. I have a ton of past brides right now having babies. So that's been a lot of fun. I have like lots of babies on my newsfeed. So, but yeah.
Okay. So, man, it's totally my bad that I didn't mention specifically earlier. We were talking about brand position. You are specifically, your specialty is wedding photography, correct?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Weddings and couples. Yeah.
Okay. So, and of course, we're talking about engagement sessions in just a little bit, but with those baby clients, this is something interesting that kind of comes up when I've talked to photographers about brand position, because, one of the things about establishing a clear brand position, if you're going to be known for something, in this case, photographing couples, and you begin sharing a portfolio of pictures of babies, newborns, toddlers, or otherwise, it could potentially confuse the brand and not necessarily hurt the business per se, but it hurt the effort at developing notoriety for a particular thing. That's one of the main significance behind brand position. So to that point, how do you handle the situation where you have a client who is a wedding client, a couple's client who is having a baby? Do they come to you asking for baby photography? Do you go ahead and do it, or do you pass it on to somebody else?
I love to continue to be in their life. They're still, I create these really great bonds with my couples, for their engagement and their weddings. And so I love doing their maternities and I love doing their baby pictures. What I'm not doing is I'm not advertising actively that I'm doing families and
Makes
then
sense.
so I'm not taking on like new clients, and I'm also not posting them.
Yep.
So on Instagram, I'm not really posting, baby pictures or family pictures or maternity pictures. You're going to see a lot more of the engagements and, travel or whatever, to show that I travel. So I am posting what I want to get more of, but I'm not going to turn them away unless they want something that just doesn't, like if they're like, we want a really posed baby picture. I'm like, I don't really do those. If you want something where I come to your house and you guys are, maybe you're nursing your baby, it's like an in-home kind of session, or changing the baby, or, just playing with them. I just don't do like I'm not good at the whole like set up, baby setup. And I that's when I'll like refer you to somebody else. But yeah, I won't turn them away. Just, I love being a part of their life. I love seeing them again. I love, catching up with them. So,
well, but I think this is a great balance, though, because, and for everybody listening in, if you're curious, you hear me talk endlessly about the significance of brand position and focusing and specializing. If you're going to do that, and Courtney is a great example of this, focusing on photographing couples, engagements, and weddings, then it doesn't mean you can't still photograph other genres. It's just simply a matter of not advertising the other genres.
Right.
And that will help kind of minimize the potential for confusion, which I think is just, it's really important when it comes to the mass of photographers out there that a potential client might be sifting to try to get to you. If they're not a direct referral, we need to do whatever we can to stand out. And part of what's going to enable us to stand out more effectively is specializing, having a clear and distinct brand position. So anyway, I really appreciate your perspective on that, Courtney. Let me keep going, though, because time is really very much, I guess it's probably the biggest driver behind this podcast in the first place. In fact, we started a podcast, this is years ago, called the I Have a Life podcast. And it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's somewhat serious, too, at the same time, because we were talking, of course, Photographers Edit, my company, is ultimately, it's an editing company, but it's ultimately about giving photographers time back, giving them their lives back. And actually, a couple of photographers have even said I've given them their wives back because their wives no longer have to edit the way that they used to. But nonetheless, it's about time, right? Saving photographers time. So we initially started a podcast years ago, and the focus was time. How do we create efficient workflows? Well, that I think it kind of fell on deaf ears because the idea of efficient workflow is not a really sexy topic. Like most people aren't like, let's go listen to a podcast about efficient workflow. So here we have the Bokeh Podcast, and we talk about a variety of things related to running photography business, but we specifically delved into time management because at the end of the day, if we're photographers, we're running a business, and we've not created a workflow for ourselves, and you and I were actually talking about this, Courtney, before we got started, that 80-20 principle. If we're not creating a workflow for ourselves that gives us freedom and flexibility, what's the point in the end? Like we leave the 9 to 5 and then we go work 60 hours a week in our own business. I don't know. It feels like we're missing out in the process. So to that point, that was a long way of setting up the question, which is what is one of the most significant ways that you've found that has enabled you to save time or to manage your time a little bit better so you can not just, of course, run a business, but also have a life, a personal life, relationships, friends and family, go do things that you like to?
Yeah. So usually there's a couple things that I do. So I will block out a little bit of vacation time, say like in the months leading up to wedding season, or sometimes in the middle of wedding season, if I see that there's like, oh, here's a gap in this area. Say I'm working like a Friday, Saturday wedding, but I have that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off. I will block that out and do like a little trip somewhere. So, and I've done it literally in the middle of wedding season. We've
That's
been
great.
to, so it kind of refreshes me. Like I come back and I'm like ready to work.
Yeah.
So it's been helping me the last few years to just not get burnt out at the end of the year. But the other thing too, is because I am a workaholic, I love working. I love being busy. I think it's I don't know. I think it's a genetic thing because my sister and brother are the same way. But, I think for me too is blocking out days of not working. So like I will work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then if I can be flexible, if someone's like, well, I only have this Monday available, I'll work with them, but then I'll block out the previous Thursday.
Cool.
So I try to have a few days off that I can edit my photos or that I can be with my family or go to a movie. And then also trying to not feel guilty about doing that. I have been quoting my clients instead of saying, yeah, I can get them to you in a week. I'll say it'll probably be a couple weeks before I can get them to you. But I always send out a couple sneak peeks to hold them over.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, here's a few sneak peeks. I'll get them to you in a couple weeks. So that allows me time to kind of live my life. Whereas before I was like trying to get it done within that week. And then I get a couple, usually during high school senior, I don't do too many of them anymore, but a lot of times they'd say, oh, I need these like in a week or two. I'll actually charge them like a rush fee because that's not allowing me to relax or to have a life. So
yeah,
it's kind of like compensating for that, but
yeah, I love that you're proactive about that, though. It takes a little bit of guts to do something like that, to block off the kind of time that you do, because I think there might be FOMO with a lot of photographers.
Totally.
And as a result, they're like, oh, I just have to, as you were talking about earlier, you have to hustle all the time, right? That's right. The thing that everybody says now. And yet, as you and I were discussing before we started recording, that there is, I think, something to be said as well to making sure that so-called hustle isn't just busy work for the sake of staying busy, but actually doing things that matter, that translate to growth in the business, and that are actually productive. So there is a balance to be had. That so-called balance is going to look different for different people. I have a lot of respect for the fact that you are proactive and blocking out time for yourself. I think this is something that we all need to be doing consistently. I think that's really, really great.
Yeah. And then this year it's kind of different. This year I decided I wasn't going to take on any engagements that weren't like clients already, because I wanted to focus on the people who've hired me for their wedding. I had 40 plus weddings this year.
Wow.
So it was a kind of a rough year to like get hit with all this,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm still engaged. I'm still able to focus on my clients. But it was the year that I was saying, I'm not taking anything besides like who've already booked me. And then this happened. Now I'm like, okay, who needs family pictures done? But it is interesting. I do that because I was finding I want to say like the first maybe 6 years of business, I was just dead by the end of like December. I just was like I was like, I don't want to do this again. But then April would roll around and I'm like so excited and I'm desperate, or I shouldn't say desperate, but I was just so excited to get back to work. So I just have realized like I need to block time off for myself. Because I love going to the movies and I love going camping. Not like I glamp more than camp, but I love spending time with my friends. Like that's important to me. So I don't want to just be like a slave to my work and to my business. I want to enjoy it still. So I have to find that fine balance of what works for me. And it's going to look different for everybody. But for me, usually having about 4 days off, it helps. And then when my kids go to bed, that's usually when I'll be editing. And that's kind of my work time.
I've got this really cool solution for your editing problem too, so you don't have to edit at night.
I know.
Hint.
I know. And you know what's funny is I used you guys for like 2 years, and I used you guys for weddings.
Yeah.
It was last year and the year prior, but I haven't really had any weddings this year, so
Fair.
I haven't been back just because I was only using you for weddings because the little sessions, the engagement sessions, they only take me maybe an hour to go through. So
got it.
The weddings are usually the ones that are time consuming. And
I'm ultimately giving you a hard time, but I do appreciate the shout out too. That's really nice of you. And we've certainly seen just a massive downturn in business, of course, as a result of COVID, because all of our clients are also experiencing similar issues themselves. So it's a tough season to be in, but wow,
Yeah.
40 weddings too. That's so impressive that you've got that kind of a business established. But it speaks to your business acumen and the fact that you're able to do something like that while simultaneously, again, being proactive and blocking out time for yourself. I think it speaks volumes. And I think for all of our listeners, it's a really great example. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that as well. All right. So when we're talking about time management, then naturally delegation, outsourcing, I mean, we were just talking about the idea of outsourcing or delegating editing work elsewhere. Have there been any other elements of your business that you've experimented with when it comes to delegation?
Yes. I laugh because I hate admitting it, but my assistant is a really good writer.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll have her write up emails or newsletters or things that I'm going to be sending out. And she also does all my blogging for me as well. So
why do you hate to admit that? I think that's brilliant.
Oh, because I don't know. It's like, I like to say that I do everything. I don't know. Maybe it's a pride thing, but I don't know. I'm just not really good at writing. I have a very I barely graduated high school. Like my GPA, I think was like 1.8. Like I barely graduated.
Yeah, but look at you. You started this successful business. And I mean, the idea that you've found something that you can delegate to somebody else so you don't have to manage that, I think it's brilliant. I mean, that's running a business proactively. That's running a business in a way that not only allows you to focus on the things that actually grow the business, but it also allows you to have a life in the process. So my goodness, don't beat yourself up for that.
It's nice too, because I absolutely love my assistant. I have a couple that I rotate between, and both of them actually are previous brides of mine. Yeah. But they're crazy talented, and they were looking for a job, and I was like, "Come work for me." So, but I love working with them, and they come over. We do like a monthly meeting where we talk about the emails that we want to do, or the blog posts, how we can better the SEO. Basically, it's just like kind of a monthly meeting, but it's nice. Like we'll, have coffee or lunch or whatever, and, just kind of hang out, but we're also getting stuff done. So it's really fun.
I think that's, man, it's just like best of all worlds. So you got the delegation thing going on. You get to hang out with friends, have some good conversation. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, really.
You gotta love who you work with.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. But again, don't beat yourself up for delegating something out that's saving you time, that's creating freedom, that's letting you focus on the things that you want to. I think that's really, really great. Really a great example for our listeners.
Trying. I have my sister is like a crazy, she's a mom, she's a mom of 3 little girls, and she's really, really present on Instagram. And so for a while I had her doing my Instagram for me. And then I found Planoly, and I've been using Planoly. And so I haven't needed her anymore.
Yeah.
But she was helping me with my Instagram for a while. It was funny because my aunts, like all my family, are like, this isn't Courtney writing this. Like they all knew.
But, you point out the significance of software. So, one of probably the most effective way to save time in a business is definitely delegation. But one of the others at the top of the list is automation. And we've got, it's the coolest thing. We live in 2020. There's all kinds of software out there that either doesn't cost anything or doesn't cost very much, especially in comparison to the amount of time that we're saving using those tools, something like Planoly. I think it's great. We should all leverage that kind of thing to save time. There's no reason for us to be doing unnecessary busy work and wasting a bunch of time, again, under the guise of, hustling. It's kind of becomes almost amusing at times to hear that said so much. I think there's significance to working hard, but I think we should work intelligently and to work on the things that actually make a difference. And that's where a lot of photographers get confused, especially when it comes to editing even. A lot of photographers will hold on to that stuff because the assumption is, my client's going to know the difference if I'm not editing. And, the reality is, the example I always give is I'm not only a photographer of over 10 years, professional photographer, wedding photographer, engagement photographer, family photographer, but then in addition, I own an editing company and have for about 12 years. And I am still ecstatic at the blurry, imperfect, non-color corrected photos of my kids on my refrigerator at home. I couldn't care less because it's just a great snapshot of me and my kids, or just my kids, or me and my girlfriend, who, whatever it is. It doesn't matter that it's not perfect. And yet here we are projecting onto our clients something that they probably haven't even taken 5 seconds to think about in many cases. And so I say all that to say that we need to put our effort and time and energy into things that actually matter, that translate, and we can delegate and or automate much of the rest, and it'll save us time. And again, you've been a great example of that. So I appreciate you sharing your experience and your perspective on it. But let me jump to another question. Let's talk about a book. What has been one of the most impactful books that you've read, listened to? Maybe it could even be a podcast too that's made a really big impact in your life.
I just finished, I'm so glad you asked this question because I just finished You Are a Badass and You Are a Badass at Making Money.
Okay.
And they are like my new Bibles. I am so obsessed with these books. They're from Jen Sincero. She's Italian. So her last name is kind of tricky, but I listen to her books. I have a very difficult time sitting down and like paying attention. So I listen to them when I'm doing stuff, and it helps me to focus.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Hands down. It is the best book. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a business person and you have goals and dreams and you just need a little pick me up, listen to those books, hands down. I just finished You Are About Us at Making Money last night, and I just started it right over again. Like, that's how much I love it.
Wow.
It's so good. It's a lot of like, amen. Like it's a very, I'll be listening to it and I'll be like, yes. I mean, like, I'm just loving everything that she's saying. And it's truth. It's truth that we need to be reminded of, that we need to hear. And she's funny and I love it. And I love the stories she tells in it. It's like of her own life. So, she's very real and relatable, but the messages that she gives you in those books, it's just one to make you feel empowered and great, and that you can do anything that you set your mind to. And that is one reason I love these books. She talks about a lot of different things, and there's so many things that you can relate to in your personal life and not just your business, which I love. So it kind of become my personal Bibles
They have
in
been
life.
they have been so popular here on the podcast. In fact, probably at this point, the most mentioned book on the podcast. I've done over 400 episodes, and that has been certainly in the top 3 of the books mentioned. They're just really, really popular. And I think it sounds like many people get a significant amount of encouragement from those books. Is there a particular mentality that the book seems to help you crush, like a negative mentality that the book seems to help you crush, whether it's just, either book really, that you feel like was kind of a trend for you, that reading this book was like, you know what, I don't have to think that way, or I don't have to feel that way. What was that?
It was a lot of just positive talking, positive in like saying, you know what, I'm going to do this, and just doing it, and not having to apologize, and not having to worry about what other people are going to think, and just getting it done. So like, I'll give you an example. Today before the podcast, I have to be home by this time. And my daughter's like, we need to get something at the store. And I said, you know what, we're going to go to the store, and it's going to be before this time, and I'm going to have plenty of time to come home and have something to eat. And like, it's a lot of just positive talking, and a lot of like, instead of worrying and being afraid, it's just being confident. And that has just changed me because I do that for other people. I give people encouragement and I pump them up, but I don't do it for myself. And I don't know why. But the book has just given me a lot of like, change your mindset, change how you think. And that, you can go from nothing to everything, or from 0 to 100. And people have done it. And, surround yourself by those positive people. I don't have negative people in my life. I've already weeded them out. So it's just all of that. It's just having an abundant life, but also like creating it yourself.
Ah, there it is. Creating the abundant life yourself. Yeah. See, I love that mentality. I may have to grab a copy of the book at some point, because it's been a popular enough one here in the episode, or excuse me, on the podcast. It just keeps coming up. And by the way, for those of you listening in, if you don't know already, if you go to Bokeh, of course, bokehpodcast.com is our website. If you go to bokehbookshelf.com, Haley, who produces the show, has actually put together a collection, actually, of the most popular books that have been mentioned here on the podcast. These two being 2 of those in the list. And you'll have to go check that out. If you're looking for a book to read, especially while things are a little bit slower, book to read or listen to, you can go to bokehbookshelf.com and see that list there, take some recommendations from some of our guests. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But Courtney, let me actually jump into our primary focus for today. I had a lot of questions for you about engagement sessions. And I was on your website and saw what is just a really beautiful video of kind of your approach to engagement sessions. So for everybody listening in, you're going to want to go to Courtney, just like it sounds, Bowlden, BOWLDEN.com, CourtneyBowlden.com, and scroll down really kind of to the bottom of the page, or almost the bottom of the page. There's a YouTube video there showing how Courtney approaches her engagement sessions. And that was kind of the inspiration for me in saying, you know what, we should chat about how you approach your engagement sessions. And give some perspective, lend some perspective. What do you love specifically about engagement sessions?
Oh, kind of going back to that, our very first question, kind of debunking that whole I'm not photogenic.
Yeah.
I get that literally probably 99% of the time. And these people can just be the cutest, most adorable couples.
Sure.
And I'll hear it. I hear it all the time. I'm not photogenic. I'm not photogenic. And I just kind of like, okay, challenge accepted, because my goal is to just have fun with them and capture them in their natural like setting. Yep. And it's funny because I see them, they're kind of nervous, and I just talk to them, and I try to show up a little, like I'll show up a little bit early, kind of scout out, the area, and kind of have a vision of what I want. But then when they show up, I like to just chat with them for a little bit and, make them feel a little bit comfortable. We'll just chat about, the day or things that are going on or whatever. And then I'll say, okay, let's get started. And then go into, I usually start with a walk away photo. I usually start with them holding hands, walking away, bumping into each other, looking at each other, laughing, because it creates this very like, oh, this isn't very hard. I'm not having to sit there and pose. So that's usually what I start with, just to kind of get them a little bit comfortable.
Okay. So, and we're going to actually get into a little bit more detail about your approach to posing here in just a second. But
yeah,
the idea of helping people, couples specifically, feel comfortable in front of the camera, and I'm sure it's so much fun to be able to surprise them then with the finished product, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, that looks really great," or "I look really great in that." That's really fun.
I like to. It's the fun. I started shooting film this year. But I'm doing kind of a hybrid thing. So I'm doing film and digital. But one thing I love about digital is that you can show them like, look how good you look, on the back of the camera. And usually like, I love seeing their faces and their expressions and seeing how excited they are at like, oh my gosh, that does look really good. So I do like having digital for that reason. I don't know if I could like solely just do film, but yeah, so that's really fun to kind of prove to them like, you guys are photogenic. It just takes the right person to help you, or the right camera, or the right whatever. Like
yeah,
right
and
lighting.
I happen to be right here in front of you. Yeah, that's good. No, that can be. Yeah. And I mean, I literally hear the excitement in your voice right now as you're talking about it. So I know this is something you're totally into. And that's really cool, especially after 11 years of shooting too. That says a lot. But let's actually talk about connection. You were actually alluding to this idea of connection, the significance of it earlier in our conversation. Before you actually go to photograph the client, are you usually meeting them in person, or are you just chatting on the phone? How do you begin to set the stage for a comfortable, relaxed, connected relationship with these clients?
Sometimes most of the time I'd say it's like over email. Sometimes I talk to them on the phone if they want to connect a little bit better, or they have more questions and it's just easier to do it over the phone. But I'll talk to them on the phone, or email them. I do have an engagement session style guide, and it's a planning guide too. So it says, remember to get your ring cleaned, and make sure that your outfits are pressed so that they're not wrinkly. So I do have like a kind of a tips, like here's your engagement session checklist, and then also I used to be a personal shopper. When I was a teenager, I was a personal shopper. So I love picking outfits out. So that's kind of something that like, they'll message me and say, what do you think about these together? And I love being a part of that. And I let them know, please feel free to send me pictures, text me, Zoom or, FaceTime, whatever. I love being a part of helping them pick out their outfits. So it does make them feel a little bit more comfortable and confident that I'm helping them, I think, during the process.
Okay, so you mentioned clothing, and this is actually one of the questions I want to ask you about, how you talk to your clients about what to wear, but you're saying you help them pick the clothing out. Are you doing that based on their personal style, their interests? Are you doing it based on the location you're going to shoot at? Like, how are you actually making those choices?
That's a really good question. And I do get that a lot. I usually will do it kind of with both. So I will give them like, these are things to look for. And then I usually will have an idea of where they want to get their pictures taken. And that's kind of when I will figure out, okay, if we're going to do it up in the forest somewhere, you don't want to be wearing green because you're just going to blend in. So that, I'll tell them like, wear something with color. So I do give them a little bit more on that, but I also will talk to them a little bit about, seasons wise. For example, I'll get winter engagements and they want something up in the snow. And I'm like, don't wear a dress because they're going to be so cold. So I usually will say, if you do wear a dress, bring a jacket with you so that we can take it on and off, for the pictures, and then you're not freezing cold. I did have an engagement session like that this year. It was kind of funny, but
when you're talking about color though, are you making, because I can imagine like the average dude, you're like, hey, wear something with color because, it's going to match with the location. You never know what you might get from that. Are you being really specific with them based on that location? What does that conversation sound like?
So typically I'll ask them, what do you have planned? First of all, I'll say like, please feel free to send me pictures, and they'll usually say, I'm thinking about wearing this dress or this shirt. What should he wear? It's always the guys never know what to wear. So it's kind of funny. So usually I love things without logos. I'll tell them that first off. Don't have a logo in the photo, no Nike or anything like that. And then you want something that complements the color. So she's wearing a maroon shirt. You could do navy, you could do brown, you can do tan, you can do white, you could do black. Like there's a lot that you can wear that's complementary. What you don't want to do is, if she's wearing a pattern, you don't want him in a pattern either, because that's too many patterns. So if someone's in a pattern, you want the other person in a solid.
Yeah. Contrast.
And yeah. I've had a couples who don't listen to my advice, and they wear like plaid together, man. Or they wear like two of the same type of striped shirts and different colors. And I'm like, okay, you obviously did not look at my look at my emails, but yeah, so it's I just try to guide them that way. And then that's another reason why I love having them send me pictures of their outfits, because that way I can help them. And then I always encourage accessories. So scarves, if you have like a really cute hat, I love that kind of stuff. No baseball caps. There was this one guy that he really wanted pictures with his baseball cap, because he never goes without wearing it. And I said, at the very, very end, I will get some pictures of you guys with your baseball cap on. And so I gave him like 5 photos just with his baseball cap on. So it'd make him happy, but
a little compromise, huh? Well, for everybody listening in, if you want to get a feel for what these pictures look like, to give you further context to the conversation that we're having, if you go to CourtneyBowlden.com, and then go to the galleries, there's an engagement gallery there. You can click on that and look through the images. You can also follow Courtney on Instagram, and it's Instagram.com/Courtney Bowlden, just like I spelled out earlier. So you can check that out. Of course, we'll put both of these links in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But talk to me about time of day to shoot. Now, I realize this might be obvious to some photographers, but I think preferences will differ too. Some photographers like early morning, some, maybe late afternoon or early evening. Maybe you just like to shoot in the middle of the day in the bright sunlight. I don't know. Tell me, Courtney, what's your favorite?
So I love sunset. Golden hour is just my favorite time of day. I just think it's so dreamy, so romantic. I will say that it also depends on the location that we're going to. So usually we'll have a location picked out. For example, next week I have an engagement session at this one barn, and it's facing like, if where I want them to be, the light is going to be best in the morning. So we're going to be photographing them in the morning. So that's I just kind of base it off of the location. And I'll do, I have a couple apps on my phone that help me know exactly where the light is going to be at, that time of day at that one location.
Do you have a favorite app for that? What's the favorite one you usually use?
I think it's called Sunseeker.
Okay.
I think that's what it's called. I just know the logo. It's blue and it has a sun on it. But Ben Haish, he uses that, and that's how I learned about it. And I took one of his online classes, and I learned about that. And it's been such a life changer for me for sessions, because I feel like, when I would normally schedule something at 6, it's actually going to be better if I show up at 7 or 7:30. So it just depends. And it's also great for wintertime too, because the light is so different in the winter. So I had an engagement session this winter at this lake that I've never been to. And I was able to go on the app, figure out, where the light was going to be. And then I scheduled the time. I said, let's meet at this time. So that was really cool. It's very, very helpful. Yeah,
we'll link to that app in the show notes. And I'm sure there's something comparable on Android as well. But we'll link to that app in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. You've mentioned locations a number of times now. Do you tend to shoot at a different location for each session? Do you like to go to some of the same spots? How do you choose your location?
I have a few favorite locations, but I definitely get tired of them. I'm sure most photographers are like me, where it's like, I don't like doing things at the same place over and over and over. Yeah. I feel very uninspired after a while.
Sure.
I will really base it off of them. I'll talk to them about their vision, what their house looks like if it's very white, very chic, what kind of, are you wanting more nautical? Are you wanting something, at the water, or are you wanting some downtown? So every couple is very different. And I want to be able to talk to them about what, because I assume they're going to be hanging this on their wall. And so I want to talk to them about what their aesthetic, their house aesthetic is, and like what that looks like, so that it goes well together.
Interesting.
So I think it's important to incorporate their personalities in the location as well.
Yeah, but even the house after the fact, that's a really great point too. What is that print going to look like in their home, in that decor? Yeah, that's such a great reminder, such a good point. When it comes to actually photographing the session, I mean, I think a lot of photographers, whether it's at the outset of their career or maybe all the way through their career, they geek out on the equipment. I do love gear quite a bit. Do you have particularly favorite, like, and you mentioned you're starting to shoot film, so maybe this includes film equipment as well, but what's a favorite lens? Even go ahead and mention your favorite camera bodies that you're using for these shoots as well.
This is kind of a funny question, because every year I swear it's a different lens.
Oh yeah.
For real. I think last year I was like obsessed with the 35 with my Canon. I'm a 5D Mark IV. I have a 5D Mark IV. I have two, and then I have pretty much all the lenses. I have a 35, a 50, 85. I have 2470, 7200, and I definitely shoot with the primes more. I shoot with like, I just go back and forth. Like right now, I'm just shooting with my 50. I shoot with my 50 all the time. I think the 85 will always be my baby, just because the 85 is the first like prime lens that I bought. It was my big investment. So that'll always be like in my kit. But I did start shooting with Contact 645 this year, and I have the Zeiss, the 80.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. I'm loving it. I'm definitely still learning. It came a lot easier to me, I think, starting it later in my career and understanding the camera. Whereas I feel like if I had started it, at the very beginning, I think I'd struggle more with it.
Yeah.
So I'm always surprised when I get the photos back. I'm like, oh, they turned out like, oh, they're not bad. So I'd have to say that the 85 millimeter it's my baby. It's my favorite lens.
Is that the 1.4 or 1.8 or 1.2 or?
It's the 1.2.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that thing opens up so wide and you get these.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Just dreamy bokeh. Again, for those of you listening in, make sure you go check out Courtney's work. You can see some of this stuff, but talk to me about conversation. We talked about inspiring confidence and creating a relaxed atmosphere and the significance of conversation earlier. What does that conversation with your clients sound like during the shoot? What kind of things are you saying to them to guide them, to encourage them, to help them feel like you actually are enjoying what you're doing? What does that sound like?
Well, like I said earlier, I'll show up, we'll chat a little bit, get to know each other, talk about the weather, talk about, right now it's COVID-19, talk about, what they're doing for their job. Are they working from home? Kind of getting them feeling comfortable. Or yesterday I had an engagement session and it was like, oh my gosh, you guys look absolutely amazing. And they did. They looked stunning. So it's a genuine compliment. It isn't something that I'm faking. It's very, very genuine. We'll talk about, where did you get your makeup done? I like to know who the makeup artist is or the hairstylist is, or who I need to, tag in photos. And then we'll kind of get to it. And then I start with them walking away, walking towards me. I will talk to them about, give me like a nice kind of drunken walk after you've had way too much to drink, and kind of give me a drunken walk without the ugly face, without the drunk face. And then, bump into each other a little bit, like hold hands, act like you like each other. That's my big saying. Everybody says, Courtney always says, act like you like me.
Well,
You definitely,
can I ask you though with that? Because a lot of photographers will say that sometimes jokingly, but
yeah.
what does that actually mean though? Like, I guess for somebody who's on the other side of that and they've not been photographed much, if any, before, and somebody says, act like you like each other. Do you expand on that? Do you build on that? Because it seems like some clients might get confused by that.
Yeah, it's usually when I have them facing each other and they're standing like it's like a church dance when you're too young and they're like be a Bible apart or whatever, and really they're like stiff, way far away. Yeah, and I'm like, you guys, like, I'm pretty sure you don't like hang out like this. Like, get closer together. Yeah. Or I'll just tell him, like, you know, you may experience seeing your spouse with a cyclops eye, and that's okay. You want them to be close, you know, like. So I am trying to be silly and not so serious, and so I'll tell him, like, just so you know, like, I'm not going to show, you know, you're cross-eyed right now, but I do want you guys to get a little bit closer. Or I'll say, like, I'm pretty sure. Like, I'll make jokes like, I'm pretty sure you kissed your mom like that. Like, do not kiss her that way. Like, I love it. It's just really kind of making them feel like they're my friends. Yeah. That I'm their friends. Like, honestly, I will tell them to literally have, like, take a shot right before their engagement session, just to kind of loosen them up a little bit. Sure. But I just feel like, you know, talking to them beforehand kind of gets them comfortable. And then showing them the result of the photo within the first few minutes, once you show that to them, yes, and they're like, oh my gosh, that turned out so good, then there's a little bit more trust. Yep. They trust me that I know what I'm doing. And then they're a little bit more relaxed. And then you can kind of go from there. So the conversations usually vary, like, kind of like what we were talking about. I'll kind of joke with them a little bit, but then throughout the session, I'm not having to do as much joking around because they already are a little bit more relaxed. And then usually it's just like, oh, you guys look so good. Let me have you tuck your hair behind your ear so I can see your pretty face. So you're still complimenting them. You're still talking to them through that. Or I always will tell the guys, put your hand in your pocket with your thumbs out, or put your arm around your fiance or your girlfriend or whoever, because otherwise it looks like you don't like them, like you don't want to be around them. So just kind of showing some affection. Show me some affection. Show me you love her, or show me you love him, or so kind of going from there.
But, you know, I was thinking, you were talking about the idea of giving compliments, and I've said this on the podcast before, and very much like brand position, I'm going to keep bringing it up because I don't think it can be really overstated. And that is, let's actually, when we're photographing our clients, let's actually be excited about the photographs that we're capturing of them. Let's actually believe what we are saying to them when we're complimenting them, because it will translate. I mean, you know, to the extent that I heard excitement in your voice earlier, Courtney, I can tell you are excited about what it is that you're talking about. If we do that same thing when we're complimenting our clients, and we're actually thinking about the compliments we're giving them, so we're not just kind of robotically repeating the same phrases that we would say to all of our other clients, that stuff actually makes an impact. And, you know, if we bring that kind of energy to the conversation, to the shoot, and you're talking about showing them the back of the screen, the compliments to go along with that. Oh my word, do you see this? This is stunning. How cool is this? Exactly. And genuinely communicate that excitement. That is going to make all the difference in the world. They're going to certainly be impressed by the photography, I would hope. But along with that, because keep in mind, most of these clients are not artists, they're not photographers, they don't have the same eye that we do. They are going to be as impressed just simply because you're excited about the photos, right? And that we have to keep that in mind. That plays such a big role. And, you know, I mean, I even think back to you were talking about you're a badass and you're a badass at making money, and the encouragement, the positive talk that comes through in those books. And the reality is that many of us come from a place in our life, whether it was childhood or other experiences that we've had in our life, where we're kind of reeling a little bit. We're insecure for one reason or another. And we walk into a shoot with this camera pointed our direction. We're not used to that idea. And somebody is there proactively complimenting and encouraging and helping us along. in that scenario, that really makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
everybody listening in, this is such a great reminder. Do what Courtney says, be excited, encourage your clients, actively, proactively communicate with them throughout the session. It makes all the difference in the world. And do show them the back of the camera to show them how great these images are turning out. It's going to help them relax even further, be more excited about you, about the experience. And that, of course, translates in a big, big way to the way that you are developing brand notoriety. So I do have actually a couple more questions here. You were beginning to talk about posing. And when it comes to posing, Courtney, is there a list, kind of a go-to poses that you go through for every client? Or do you just kind of, the way you were describing earlier, sounded like you just kind of go with the flow? What does that look like?
I usually start out just with them walking away. I want them to be moving. I don't like starting out with a pose because I think that people are nervous, right? So you start with them walking away, walking towards me, with a twirl or something where they're moving and you can capture them and then, show them like, look how good you guys look. And then from there, there's that level of trust. And so from there, you can put them in a pose if you wanted to, and they trust you and they're a little more relaxed. And so that's when I do because I do a little bit more posing, but not a lot of it. So I love doing the pictures where he's like kind of whispering something in her ear, making her laugh, and she's having her arms around him. I love pictures where, he's looking at her, they're facing each other. He's looking at her, she's looking at the camera. Then they look at each other. And then usually we'll do a kiss. So yeah, I mean, I have a few that I kind of just go to. And a lot of times I'll do them over again. I'll do the same pose over again, but in a different situation. And it's just to get a variety. But I like them to just talk to each other, snuggle on up, put your arms around her, snuggle up. I love the pose where he puts his arms around her and she puts her arms around his arms, and they're just kind of, she's looking up at him, and it's just a very sweet. I know that some heights don't allow for this,
Sure.
But like if he's super tall and she's super short, it looks horrible. But you could always bring like a little stool, and just get kind of a close up of that, because it is such a sweet pose, and it allows them to look at each other and laugh and talk to each other. If they're still feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I will make them laugh at each other, like look at each other and laugh at each other, because then it creates a real laugh out of a nervous laugh. Does that make sense?
Well, kind of, but if you say to them, hey, you need to laugh at each other, that might still come out forced. How do you get them to laugh naturally in that instance?
It comes out forced at first, and then they feel stupid for doing it. Then you get the genuine laugh. So I usually won't take pictures of them right at the beginning. I wait till they are like genuinely laughing, because they're like, this is so weird. And I do the same thing with the bridesmaid photos and the groomsmen photos where they're looking at each other and laughing. I'll say, everybody look at the bride and laugh at her. And usually it creates this like really genuine laugh after they are doing it forcefully. It creates this really like genuine fun. And then they are way more like comfortable and relaxed. So that one, I will tell everybody, do that pose, because it's weird. It sounds weird, but it always will give you a genuine laughter.
Okay.
Like you always get it.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. That's really interesting too, especially for photographers who are new to the game and they're like, I don't know where to get started with posing.
Mm-hmm.
That really is something that you can go to, not because there is a technically perfect way to approach it, but if you do start to tell somebody, hey, you need to just laugh at each other, look at each other, laugh. Yeah, and you're right. They're totally going to end up laughing for real because they feel totally ridiculous doing it. That's great.
Yes. It's so true. And another thing too that I've been trying to implement in my sessions is bring music. So I actually bought like a little to-go player, and I attach it to my bag, and then I'll ask them like, what kind of music do you listen to? And I like anything and everything. So I just, have it and play it, and it just kind of relaxes them. And then they can kind of dance and sway together. So they're still moving. There's still some kind of movement. but yeah, and every session is a little different. I think some people are a little bit more comfortable. They're a little more playful. Some
Sure.
are very, very romantic. I get guys who are extremely romantic, and they automatically put their hand on her chin and draw her in for a kiss. So it's kind of like knowing, the first, I'd say 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so of the session, you really get an idea of the couple and who they are as a couple. And then you kind of just adjust and go along with that. And it's fun too, because you're being able to work with so many different types of couples.
Well, and I also have to just throw this in here as a bonus for everybody listening in. If you want to see some really interesting composition, not just in the way that the image is framed, but in the way, Courtney, that you're layering some of your images with the subjects in the foreground, and then beautiful scenery in the background, or maybe even flowers that are blurred out in the foreground, framing the couple, and then you have the couple. This one particular image I'm looking at right now, flowers in the foreground, and then the couple's in focus, and then you have these trees and the mountains, the snow-capped mountains in the background. It's just really stunning composition too. So everybody listening in, make sure you go take a look. Go to CourtneyBowlden.com. And you can check out the galleries there. Last question, Courtney, maybe just a quicker answer here, but what does the delivery process look like for your engagement images? How long does it take to deliver? And are you just simply sending them like an online gallery, or do you do an in-person sales session? What does that look like?
I have not had the greatest luck with in-person sales.
Okay.
So I do an online gallery. I deliver to them. And now with the contacts, the film that I'm doing, I'm able to get prints. And so I'm delivering prints with, tied up in a little bow, and mailed off to them. But that's now that I'm trying to get a little fancier here this year. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I'm doing. But normally it's just, I will give them like an online gallery. And then I'll touch base with them, down the road. Like this year, I've been offering my clients like an 8x10 with a complimentary 8x10 with any order that they place. So that kind of gets them to think about ordering more. Like, oh, well, I get this 8x10 with my order, and it'll produce more of an order, like a bigger order.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're printing those images from the film, are they just regular matte prints, or what are you doing to actually get those printed?
Yeah, so it's just through. I use the Find Lab for my processing.
Yeah,
and I can just order them when I send my film in. I'll just say, cool. Here, yeah.
Well, this is
really really good price too.
Okay, cool. And we'll actually link to the Find Lab in the show notes, but. I really appreciate your perspective on all of this and walking us through in such detail. And again, for everybody listening in, just make sure you go to CourtneyBowlden.com or on Instagram, Courtney Bowlden. You can check out Courtney's work. You can follow what she's doing. You can send her a message and compliment her on the wonderful conversation here on the podcast. Courtney, thanks so much for making time for all of us here at the Bokeh Podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this, and I've been wanting to come on this show for a while. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, photographers, for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought of the show by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@bokehpodcast.com. We do try to bring this show to you commercial free, so make sure to check out our sponsors, photographersedit.com and Miilu, MIILU.com. Photographer's Edit is custom photo editing for the professional photographer, and Miilu is the simplest way to create and manage timelines and shot lists for the events you're photographing.